right, Saagar, what's on your radar?
Well, we need to pause and take a moment to realize that in the last week, we have seen the crumbling of arguably the two biggest stories of the Trump era. The release of the House Intelligence Community transcripts and the dropping of charges against former National Security Advisor Mike Flynn revealed that the Russiagate story was a hoax perpetuated by the Obama administration from the very beginning. While at the same time, we see that the mainstream media, which started the Me Too movement, credulously reported on ludicrous allegations against Justice Brett Kavanaugh, reverse course before our very eyes, and decide to play cover-up for Joe Biden in the span of just a few years. Aside from the election of Trump himself, Russiagate and Me Too were undoubtedly what our media has focused the most on in the last 4 years. Endless hours of cable television and ink and server space has been occupied with grappling with bombshell after bombshell report that insinuated Robert Mueller or Adam Schiff or Rachel Maddow was just one step closer to kicking the big, bad, Russian-owned Orange Man out of the White House. Yet, with the dropping of charges against Flynn, the release of the transcripts, which show that senior officials with the intelligence community bald-faced lied on national cable television when insinuating collusion, when they privately said all along they never thought there was any. And if anything, what was really covered up was the fact that former President Obama himself was instrumental in the campaign to target Mike Flynn in the waning days of his presidency. That scandalous piece of news has received less airtime on CNN and MSNBC than this gem.
In a new cover story from New York Magazine, writer Jonathan Chait argues we have not allowed ourselves to consider the full range of possibilities. Chait lays out what could be considered the worst-case scenario for Trump-Russia collusion, that Donald Trump has been a Russian intelligence asset since 1987.
Friend of the show, Matt Taibbi, has described the Russiagate scandal and its media coverage alone as an extinction-level event for the credibility of the mainstream media. And I would add to the credulousness of the Obama national security state. You had people like James Clapper, John Brennan, a million no-name former law enforcement officials make cable news careers out of telling outright lies on national TV, selling books, making millions of dollars, and deluding millions of Americans into believing a complete conspiracy theory. And the worst part is, they're getting away with it. They kept their contracts. They kept the money. The MSNBC viewership base is jumping on board, permanently terrified of Russians around every corner. The Flynn story and the release of the transcripts is the last nail in the coffin of this story. And it alone would be enough to say, never trust these people ever again. But there's more. And that is something that we've spent a lot of time here on Rising talking about in the last few weeks. The allegations of former staffer Tara Reade against Vice President Joe Biden. She brings with her multiple people she allegedly spoke to years ago who remember her recalling the story, her ex-husband who thought it was noteworthy enough to include it in a divorce filing in the 1990s, her mother called into Larry King Live at the time. I can go on and on and on. We are talking about somebody who has evidence and corroboration on her side that Christine Blasey Ford, Deborah Ramirez, and Julie Swetnick could never dream of. And yet, the same media that published Julie Swetnick's BS rape allegations, that published hearsay that nobody could remember from a freshman year Yale Law party, and of course, relentlessly push an allegation from a high school party that literally nobody involved can allegedly even remember, doesn't find it credible enough. The same media that took 48 hours to interview liar Julie Swetnick and Michael Avenatti, same media that published anything Hillary Clinton-linked lawyer Deborah Katz told them to during the Brett Kavanaugh saga, is just nowhere to be found now that Joe Biden is the one who's being accused. And the same media who can barely find the courage to challenge the lying Democratic politicians like Nancy Pelosi, Kirsten Gillibrand, Stacey Abrams, and too many more to count. I mean, Gillibrand literally laid out the standard in 2018.
I believe Dr. Blasey Ford because she's telling the truth. And you know it by her story. You know it by the fact that she told her therapist 5 years ago. It was documented at the time. We have the therapist's notes. She told her husband, this is a trauma she's been dealing with her whole life. She doesn't want to be in a bedroom that doesn't have 2 doors. People knew that about her a long time ago. She told a friend a year ago. She told a reporter before Dr. Kavanaugh was ever named. These are the hallmarks of truth.
Yeah. Media staked their credibility on Me Too and Russiagate, and they killed both of those in the span of just a week. And it shows us exactly how much faith we should place in them from this day forward. Because as much as I wish I could tell you that this will end them, We all know the truth. They will just pretend like it didn't happen, move on. Millions of Americans will stick with them because they literally do not have access to dissenting information. MSNBC viewers can't be outraged about the Obama scandal if they don't know it exists. CNN viewers can't be outraged with Democratic hypocrisy if they don't see it on their primetime programming. What they choose not to show you is far more important than what they choose to show you. And it's on all of us to remember incident after incident in the future when we're evaluating their work. And it really was amazing, Crystal. I was looking at this and I was like, you see that Mike Flynn, the release of those transcripts, you see an MSNBC guest who lied on national television and told a complete opposite story on their own network, facing no repercussions.
Yeah.
You see, the charges dropped against Mike Flynn, the revelation that these FBI agents basically set him up. And you see all of the credulousness. Chris Hayes, who has, 2.6 million viewers or something like that every night, brings on Jonathan Chait to talk about whether Trump was a Russian asset in 1987. And I know you've highlighted that here. And, I went back and watched the clip because it's just amazing. He goes, Chris, it's probably not true. But we have to consider the low probability that it might be true. What is the worst case? They put this man on national TV.
Right, and act like
millions of people.
And act like this is journalism. Yeah.
It's insane.
And here's the thing, who has honestly been the most wronged by this coverage, I would say, is the Democratic primary electorate that actually does care about defeating Donald Trump, that actually does want to be able to win back the White House and win back the Senate and be able to have a different kind of politics. Mm-hmm. Those are the people who have had been the most poorly served because, they trust these individuals. They don't have there isn't a lot of access to dissenting information. And so when Rachel Maddow and Chris Hayes and these other trusted figures night after night after night are telling them that this is the biggest scandal of all time, that it's Watergate times 1,000 or whatever, over and over and over again, and it's only a matter of time before the walls close in and the next shoe drops and the next bombshell is just around the corner, that they get caught up in that and believe that, and also believe that they must, and this actually ties into my radar and what I was talking about with the Never Trumpers, believe that Trump is such an existential threat that all that matters is defeating him and that all other principles be damned, which is exactly what the Never Trumpers want them to think, and the conservative corporatist wing of the party want them to think, that they have to throw all their principles away in service of defeating Donald Trump because he is Watergate times 1,000, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So they've been really, poorly served. On the Tara Reade stuff, one of the most heartbreaking to me moments in watching the story unfold was when Tara talked in that BuzzFeed interview about how she really thought that this media bias thing was just like a Republican talking point.
And Stacey Abrams and Democratic hypocrisy.
She really these were her heroes. Stacey Abrams, Kirsten Gillibrand, these were her heroes, right? She really trusted the New York Times and the Washington Post, MSNBC. She really was that person. And now that she's living it and seeing the way that she's dismissed, the way they ignore it, the tactics that they use, the things they choose not to cover, as you put it, her eyes are open. It's just all crumbled around her as she's realized. And I think a lot of people are realizing, the media looks at their low numbers, the low amount of trust, and they go, oh, it's because Donald Trump calls us fake news. And he is obnoxious and over the top about the media. Let's be clear about that. But they never, ever, ever, ever stop to go
how did this happen?
What did we do?
Yeah.
How did we get here? Why don't people trust us anymore? What happened?
That's exactly what it is. And look, like I said, the droids are looking for that for the last 2 years of a presidential conspiracy. It's right here. It's actually insane that the outgoing president of the United States is basically trying to set up the incoming national security advisor. That is a charitable reading of what happened in those transcripts. And look, at this point, it's probably too late. I'm not out here calling for a commission or whatever, but I want some recognition that this happened. I want somebody who, the amount of airtime, line by line, on Trump Tower Moscow, on Jonathan Chait, on his tax returns, on Deutsche Bank, on servers pinging each other. These were huge stories in our media. And the former president of the United States is basically setting up an incoming national security advisor. Nothing. And on Me Too, it's the same thing. Again, the same people, Harvey Weinstein and Jeffrey Epstein, they covered up Jeffrey Epstein. They tried to cover up Harvey Weinstein, who spent all this time talking about powerful men exposed and all of this. And it culminated in 2018 with Brett Kavanaugh. And that's really when the public swung against it because they saw what was happening. But the media continued to try and maintain that they had handled that story well. And now we know that they were not handling it with they never had even a semblance of fairness that they ever wanted to apply across the board. And they've ruined any legitimate efforts in order to change the discussion. Like I said, I'm not against Me Too on Harvey Weinstein and Epstein and all that. I wanted that stuff to come out. But the credulousness and the integrity of the reporting on those has to be matched every single time.
Right.
It went out the door with Brett Kavanaugh, and you can't bring that back. And that's what so many of us warned at the time, which is like, look, if you want to keep taking people down, you have to have credulousness and good sourcing, and you have to actually report these things in a legitimate and fair way. That's gone. And now the old hypocritical partisan leaning stand or partisan viewpoints on every single one of these things is back. So I guess I wish them good luck, because the things that they staked their major credibility on in the last 3 years, undone in a span of just 2 weeks. And there's no recognition of it.
And on Russiagate, they've turned so much of the mainstream Democratic Party into insane people, conspiracy theorists. I mean, anytime you do anything that they find inconvenient or dissent or whatever, you're immediately a Russian agent.
Tara is a supposedly Russian
Chris
asset.
Hayes, for even covering the story, right?
Yeah,
he covered it. We're going to talk about him a little bit more, but he covered the story one time and fired Chris Hayes, turned on Twitter. I saw a tweet that was like, Chris Hayes is a Russian agent. It's just you people have
he went on RT once.
Lost your minds.
Certainly.
But it's all because of the way that the media, and why did they choose to obsess over this particular story? Because number one, it doesn't threaten anyone's bottom line.
Exactly.
And number two, it was salacious and conspiratorial and great for ratings. Not great for you, not great for the Democratic Party even, great for themselves, didn't threaten their own interests.
Certainly.
Next up on Rising, Anand Giridharadas changed how many people think about philanthropy and income inequality. He's going to tell us about his latest project, A Seat at the Table, a new Vice News show when Rising continues.